Welcome everyone to our Friday episode of Parenting Children with Special Needs in a New Reality. I am Aubrey Schmalley, your host for all of these webinars, and today I am back on deck sharing something that has become increasingly important in my practice as I evaluate children and try to come up with recommendations that are really going to build them a best support plan in the school environment and help the providers that are working with them understand them better. So something that has really become an integral part of what I look at when I'm doing an evaluation for occupational therapy is much more beyond just the scope of handwriting or fine motor skills, or even what many of you know as sensory integration intervention, because at the core of sensory integration and at the core of occupational therapy is how is your brain and your body utilizing information coming in, integrating that information, processing it in order to produce an adaptive response. And an adaptive response being your ability to actually participate in your life roles as a child, as a sibling, as a family member, as a student, as a play partner. And if there are things at any level, whether it's at the periphery, like you're extra sensitive to sound or your eyes don't work properly, or whether it's at the processing level, I really need to understand how all those pieces are working together in order to be able to make recommendations that are going to serve that child the best in their academic program, and as well as help the parents who so desperately want to be able to support their children in the right way, to have information as well as strategies and techniques that they can use to address whatever those underlying features are that are affecting a child's adaptability and ability to participate in all of the important occupations of being a child. So on that note, I want to talk today about visualization. Now, visualization, the reason that it's become increasingly important to me is that I look around and I see the extreme increase in technology use around the world, and how much marketers and anybody putting out content on the internet really rely on visual images to convey information. So when we think about that and we think about the volume of visual information that is out in the world, whether it's photographs or short video clips or movies or pictures or visual schedules, or posters that are on the teacher's wall to remind you of different concepts that you're working on in the school setting, or even just pictures around your house or video games or anything that that can be classified as a visual input. The amount that our bodies and our brains and our visual system are taking in on a daily basis is exponentially higher than it was 20 years ago. And the brain has a phenomenal capacity to process visual information. So it's very natural that as humans and as individuals and as children, people will gravitate towards that because there's so much positive feedback and quick reactions and quick internalization of information that happens when you're taking in information through the visual system. But at the same time, there are a lot of things coming up that actually are showing that we're getting all this visual information, but when this information is not available to us, we're not able to pull out concepts and be able to, shift towards the other skills that are really necessary to adapt and respond to your daily environment. So let me give you an example. When you are getting ready to go grocery shopping, someone says grocery shopping, and all of the images, not words, all the images pop in your head of the steps that you need to take to get yourself to the grocery store and procure the items that you need, right? I'm going grocery shopping. That means I need to get my shoes on. I need to make sure that I have my list and my purse and my keys. I need to make sure that I have enough time to do it. And all of that requires, executive functioning skills. But first, those visual images of that experience of shopping get triggered in your mind and help you make the plan. But what if all I ever got was a visual schedule with pictures that may not necessarily be my personal experience of what to do when I go grocery shopping? And then you take it away, and without those pictures, I can't recall and I can't pull from my memory what those steps are that I need to do. And this is the experience of many of our kids who have accommodations on their IEP for visual schedules and providing of pictures and visual information to make choices and to follow through on plans throughout the day. Now, why would you be missing some of this visualization skill? And the answer is because we don't have to. We don't have to visualize as part of our everyday life if we can very quickly access images in the world that are going to fill the gaps in that information. And we don't have to think it up on our own. We can look up the information, and actually many teachers have said, oh, it's more important to know where to get it than to memorize it. But I would challenge you to question that a little bit, because we do want children to be functioning independently and not have to rely on visuals or someone else's visual plan to be able to execute something. Think about that as it relates to direction following. I tell you, could you go in the kitchen, get me a bowl and a spoon and pour some cereal and add some milk and bring it back to the breakfast table? So what if I can't pull those pictures in my head? It's going to be very hard for me to take the language of what you said and make sure that I have the plan so that when I get to the kitchen, I can remember exactly the steps that you gave me. What if it all sounds like words? What if, I don't have a visual memory bank to build off of? And then what do I start doing? I start looking around for visual cues in my environment to help me remember. Now, if you're in a kitchen or if you're in a grocery store, or even if you're in a classroom where your teacher has a lot of visuals on many different topics posted around the room, how easy is it going to be for your brain to sift through that visual information and come up with the plan and the directions that you were given to follow through? And what is the likelihood that you're now going to look like a child who has an attention deficit disorder, that is visually distractible, that is off task, that can't follow through with directions, and that gets overwhelmed in the visual environment? So these are the patterns that we see in children that have ADHD and children that are diagnosed with executive function issues. And we wonder, in this world of technology, in this current environment that we live in, where there's so much visual information coming in, how do we then help a child be able to retrieve visual information from their memory bank, not just rely on external visual information to be able to find their plans, to be able to picture what the directions are, picture themselves actually executing something, and follow through on task demands? So many kids that I evaluate come in to the evaluation, and I'm checking not just, are they over or under sensitive to noise, or, can they do this fine motor task or this gross motor task? I also take time to have them build a sequence, have them draw out the sequence that they experienced, or have them follow directions when there isn't an obvious plan in the environment, and then watch what happens. And if I've ruled out that there's an auditory processing problem, my next question is, are they even able to make a picture in their head of what I'm asking them to do and then follow through? Or if they experience something physically, are they then able to retrieve those memories as visual images and make a drawing of them? And a lot of them are not. A lot of those children are missing pieces of directions. They'll get the concrete part, but they won't get the overall idea of what I'm asking them to do. They'll spend a lot of time scanning the environment to look for what it is that I said, and then get distracted by the extraneous visual information that's there. Or they'll build the plan, but then they're completely unable to go and then make a drawing without looking at every item in the environment to figure out what to draw next. So as I think about visualization, visualization happens not just in planning and sequencing and executive function issues, it also happens in math, it happens in reading, and it happens when we're trying to motor plan a new motor task demand. So think of it as when you're doing sports visualization, you close your eyes. If you've done 100 free throws and you're a basketball player, then your body has developed a muscle memory of that activity. So when you are visualizing in the locker room how you're going to make that game-winning shot, you are picturing the nuances of what your body is doing, what that plan is, how much it took to be able to get the ball to go the distance, how much accuracy and your alignment of the ball with the hoop to be able to score that game-winning point. Now, if I don't have good body awareness and I don't have good spatial awareness, that's going to be a problem in how the information is going in. But then my ability to pull out that information and retrieve those motor memories and all of those experiences that I've gained from practicing comes through using visualization to pull those images and then activate the wiring and the connections in my brain to communicate with my muscles and communicate with my visual system to be able to execute that free throw. So if there's not a problem in the sensory foundation, or maybe there is, I'm still looking at, whether or not there's a translation from that physical experience into those visual images and memory. And we don't use language for that process. You don't sit in the locker room and say, okay, put my hands 3 degrees to the left. I need to hold the back of the ball and curl my fingers exactly this way. Your brain doesn't think in words, it thinks in pictures. And keeping that in mind is really important, because that's what's going to allow you to be able to then work on building visualization for your child to help them be more independent and more successful. So we've talked about executive function, and now we've talked about, how we take that visualization and turn it into a motor plan for our bodies. The other area that we need to talk about is academics. So if you've ever worked with a reading teacher or worked with your child on learning, or spent any amount of time teaching reading skills or learning how to teach your child reading skills, then you've probably heard of the concept of picture at punctuation. And teachers use this a lot to have children pause and then see if they're able to develop a picture in their mind of what's going on in the story. Now, why do we even care that they would have a picture in their mind? Why can't they just read the words? The reason is there are many children where I'm sure you've heard, seen that they can pick out little details of the story, but they absolutely miss the entire scene or the concepts of what's going on in the scene so that they can answer some of those reading comprehension questions. If you are doing picture at punctuation, then what you're really creating is the movie in your mind of that story. Unfortunately, a lot of times the books that we read now have been made into a movie first, and then we read about it in the book. So think about what happens in your brain when you have seen a movie and then you read a book. You actually didn't generate your own images in your mind of what that scene looked like that the author portrayed. Instead, what did your brain do? It pulled pictures of the movie that you saw, and now you're only ever going to create the visual images of the actual visual movie that you watched prior to going to read the book. And so the richness of the language and the descriptions that the author used when writing a book before the movie was created is significantly different than a book that was created after the movie. Authors forever and a day have used storyboards before they ever put paper to pencil. And the reason that they do that is because they do want to see the scene, and they are playing out that creativity and that movie in their mind of what they want the book to provide as an experience for the reader. And they add the actions and the language and the prepositions and the adjectives and everything that gives the book richness and depth in terms of language. But it came first from the creative movie in their mind. Now, in school, do we write stories that way? Do we have teachers that first have you draw out a storyboard and then use the graphic organizer to construct your story? My guess is that you probably haven't met very many teachers who've used that strategy because they do assume that kids have that movie in their mind because that's the way it's always been before, visual images sort of took over our technological space. And I would challenge you as a parent, if you do nothing else, when you're helping your child read, when you're trying to build reading comprehension, that you do take time to have your child close their eyes, shut out the visual input that's around them, shut out the pictures that they might have seen in the book, and make that movie in their mind. Because the movie in your mind and that ability to visualize what you're reading about or internalize your experience and develop a visual movie in your mind to be able to retell it to someone else is such a critical skill when it comes to being creative, when it comes to developing independence, and when it comes to following through with activities that require higher level executive function skills. So as a reader, you need that movie in your mind first. As a creator, you need that movie in your mind first. So encourage your children to draw out their stories before they go to the graphic organizer, because language is an outgrowth of an experience. And a lot of times the movie in your mind when you're creating a story comes from some experience that you've had. If your child tends to be a really concrete thinker or very visual thinker, they may be the kid that always talks about video games, that always talks about certain movies or characters. They're always talking about what the characters are wearing versus what the characters are doing. All of those are signs that your child is very, very reliant on visual information to help them kind of memorize what's going on in the world. But it also is often what gets them stuck when they have to move away from someone else's creative ideas that are then depicted visually and come up with their own creative ideas. So creativity requires that you shut out visual input to be able to pull your own visual images of a story that you want to tell and attach language to it. Let's think of visualization as a function of doing your math skills. Now, math by nature is very analytical, which means we should be staring at numbers and math problems in order to figure them out. However, if you are asked to represent a number concept in 3 or 4 different ways, which is something that they often challenged my daughter to do at the elementary school level, like represent it as, using the stacking cubes, or represent it horizontally, or represent it vertically, or express the number sentence, as as a drawing. Whatever it is, that requires your brain to not be analytical in that moment, but be able to visualize those concepts and conceptualize the information, which is more in the creativity department and spatial awareness department rather than the analytical department. So I need that ability to have the images in my head and mentally rotate the numbers and then flex between different concepts. But again, it's all visual. It's not words, and it's not that I'm analyzing the numbers that are in my brain in that moment. All I am doing is rotating them around, putting them in different positions, and expressing them in different ways. So think about that as we look at the impact of technology on a child's ability to gain academic proficiency, to be able to work independently, to be able to really kind of learn new motor skills and develop their own creative plans in play. And then think about your child. Is your child someone who sticks to the same activities over and over again? Your child who sticks to the same imaginary scripts, maybe is very heavy. We say in imagination, but if we looked a little deeper, it's really just recycling of a movie or a video game. Is your child a concrete thinker in that they can't take imagination or something that they saw in a video and then translate that to real life experiences? When we were younger, maybe you were someone who pretended to be Superman and jumped off the couch with a cape that was made out of the sheet off your bed. How many of our kids now, if they don't have the costume, then they don't have the creativity and they won't play the game? Or they spend more time talking about what the character looks like than actually physically engaging in the activity. Now, it's not just visualization that feeds these kinds of play skills. It's also the ability to generate those visual ideas and then translate them into motor actions. So I don't want you to think that visualization is the only piece that allows for expanded and more dynamic play with peers. But if you don't have ideas and you don't have the movie in your mind, then it's much more difficult to pick up on things that the other peers are doing, pick up on language that the other peers are using, and then be able to integrate that to generate a new play scheme that isn't exactly a reproduction of the video game or the movie that the child saw. So we can get flexibility in play by supporting the development of visualization, supporting the development of having physical experiences that we then make drawings about. And then on the reading level, like I said, we can close our eyes, shut out the visual input, visual information, and try to develop a picture in the child's head, and then have them draw those pictures to be able to see, what is it that they're actually seeing? How is it that they are experiencing the story? And that will allow us in a much more productive and nuanced way to maybe capture where the gaps are in how they're internalizing and experiencing the world. So I have something in my clinic called my achievements wall. And the achievement wall is where I put up all the drawings that the children have made when they come to the clinic. And while I tell them that it's the achievement wall, the secret is that it's actually me checking on the development of that ability to internalize their experiences, visualize their experiences, and then reflect those experiences on a piece of paper. So when a child does something really amazing that they've never done before, which is usually what I tell them when we're making an achievement, we will construct a drawing. And it might be as simple as just putting one piece of equipment on a piece of paper if developmentally they're not able to do something larger than that. As their ability to internalize their experiences grow, what I then see is not only will they put the equipment on the paper or the obstacle course sequence on the paper, I will then see them put themselves in the picture. And not just themselves, but themselves actually doing something to execute the task. So there is a shift between just focusing on the concrete visual information that's available in the environment to experiencing myself in the process and then being able to reflect my experience on that piece of paper. So all along, as we're putting these achievements on the wall, I am watching that growth of the ability to come up with ideas, visualize what you want to do in terms of a plan, be able to execute it. And if you can't visualize the plan, be able to take an experience that you've had and turn it into a visual memory and be able to represent that experience visually on a piece of paper. So we can go two different directions, right? We can take language from reading and make a drawing about it. If we want to create the story, then we make the drawing first and then we attach the language, specifically verbs, prepositions, and then any adjectives to add as descriptors. If we are practicing a motor experience and we're not that great at it yet, first we have the physical experience and then we make the drawing and then we close our eyes and visualize ourselves being able to do the task before we then go and try again. And if you can't pull that plan from your head, if you can't see yourself doing it, then you're not ready to visualize, and you're certainly not ready to start by making a plan and then executing it. And so I think it's really important to keep in mind that we often ask children and expect that children will be able to make a plan or follow directions or just automatically visualize the things that they're reading about in the storybook. And it's not true anymore. It's not true because the amount of visual information coming into our space is contributing to confusion and distractibility. And it's also, using a different part of the brain that doesn't require us to visualize and utilize our creativity to become more independent in life skills, in social interactions, in play, and in our academic skills. So I would challenge you as a parent to think about where those deficits are in your child, and as you see and look at the patterns in your child's behavior, in your child's play, in your child's academic skills, in the way that they read or the way that they do math, think about whether or not they're heavily reliant on external visual information, or if that movie in their mind is playing, if they can visualize things and shut out that visual input, maybe even just by putting their hands and cupping over their eyes while you ask them, some questions, or you ask them if they see the picture in their head while they're reading or before they go to do something. Because teaching them visualization is a powerful, powerful skill because it activates the wiring in the brain that is connected to that task demand. So the physical experience activates the wiring, and the visualization later and the practicing and the mental rehearsal of that experience activates the same wiring. So when you want your brain to function optimally, you need to approach it from both directions to strengthen the skill, to reduce the distractibility, to increase attention and focus, and to make sure that you are building a child who's empowered and is able to come up with their own ideas, follow directions, follow through with plans, write their own stories, and meaningfully contribute to their school life, their social life, and their family life in an impactful way, rather than just relying on the accommodations of assistive technology, visual schedules, pictures to help kids remember what they're supposed to do next. We want to scaffold away from that and help them pull those images from their memory, because that is how you're going to get a child who's then able to make that transition to middle school and high school and beyond, so that they can continue to grow in their independence and in their confidence. Thank you, everybody, for listening today. I know that I gave you a ton of information on visualization. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me, Aubrey at sensational-achievements.com.